This is the Conscious Productivity Podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie Woodward. This is where we're going to talk about your ambition and your drive and how to honor your ambition and drive without losing yourself in the hustle. It's about making the shift from unconscious productivity to conscious productivity. I am thrilled that you're here, and let's jump right in to today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Conscious Productivity Podcast. I am Stephanie Woodward, your host, and this is episode 35. We are coming up to, it's past the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, I believe, because they've been coming out every other week, and we're at episode 35. And I do remember recording the first episodes in the summer last year in the heat. I remember being very warm recording those first 10 episodes of the studio. And so I know that we're coming up to the 1 year anniversary, or we've just passed it. So thank you for being here with me on this journey. I hope you continue to enjoy these episodes, and know that you can always reach out and let me know if there is a topic that you really want me to talk about. I usually choose my topics based on what is coming up in my client programs or what I'm noticing is going on just in the industry in general and what I feel is coming up for all of us as business leaders right now. So I feel into it. I'm never recording more than 2 weeks out. So all of these topics are usually fresh and essentially in real time. And this might be the second to last episode that I will be putting on YouTube. So I don't know if you've had a chance to check out the video version of the podcast, but I was doing a little experiment this summer, and 6 episodes, all of the summer episodes were going to be up over on YouTube. So if you want to feel like we are chatting live, I don't know whether you would want to picture yourself seated across from me, but you can certainly check out the YouTube episodes. Let me know what you think. If you do like the video version, I do want to know, because I may continue it. At this point, I'm leaning towards sticking with audio only because I think the majority of you are audio listeners. But you let me know. Let me know if you're enjoying those video episodes as well. So with all of that said, let's jump into today's episode. This is another topic that I just love to talk about. And it's this idea, or this ability, I should say, to be calm under pressure. And now I think every leader I've ever worked with has either had this attribute and they've been really credited for it. And people say, what I love most about you is your ability to stay calm, composed under pressure. Or for those leaders who do not have this natural ability, they've been told, hey, I would like you to be more calm under pressure, or I would like you to cultivate this attribute. So maybe you can relate. Maybe you are someone who has always felt that they can be calm under pressure. Maybe you're at that other extreme where you struggle to remain calm under pressure, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. I will say in my leadership programs, I often do an exercise where I have people think about one of the best leaders they've ever had and what are some of the attributes that they associate with that particular leader. And being able to be kind of non-reactive, calm, and cool under pressure is something that shows up again and again in answer to that question. If you're a client that has done a 360 assessment with me, I use the leadership circle profile assessment. And one of the competencies that tool measures is composure. And of course, composure, if you know the leadership circle profile tool, is one of those competencies that is very positively correlated with highly effective leadership. So this is something that we do want to try to cultivate. The problem is it can feel really out of reach. If it's something that doesn't happen naturally for you, it can feel like something that you're either born with or you're not born with. So you might have heard that this is an important characteristic or an attribute. You may have said it to yourself. You may want to cultivate it. Maybe you've tried, but no one, or very rarely, no one is teaching you exactly how to do that. We can aspire to it. We can want it for ourselves, but it can feel really out of reach. Like you either have this personality trait of calm and cool as a cucumber under pressure, or you don't. So I want to just clear the air there with that. You can absolutely cultivate this attribute. You can build it over time. You don't need to be born with it. Many of us are not born, myself included, are not born unflappable or cool as a cucumber. Most of us do not have this internal switch that we can flip on and off. Oh, something's happened, flip the switch. I'm going to remain cool. Most of us don't have that. And I also want to talk today about not faking it. So you'll know in the title of this isn't about faking being calm. And I'm going to talk about what I mean by that a little later in the episode. But it's about finding like a genuine place that you can settle in when you're faced with pressure around you, where you don't feel like you're faking it, but you also don't feel like you are having a big emotional reaction to it either. So as we head into this episode, here's what I want to offer. This isn't necessarily about staying calm, at least not in the way that we typically describe calm. This is about cultivating a pause. Okay. A pause, Pause, a pause in whatever it is that we are doing. This is going to be some of the magic in helping you create this composure under pressure. So we are going to spend this entire episode unpacking this idea of how to step into a pause when you're faced with something that might throw you off center usually. But before we go any further, I want to just be really, really open and transparent with you, because this topic about staying calm under pressure, it can go very deep, very fast. And right now, nervous system regulation, polyvagal theory, your vagus nerve, all of these are having a big moment. If you go on TikTok, if you go on Instagram, you are going to find a lot of information. Some of it, put forward by extremely experienced and really, really reputable practitioners, and some of it really, really grifty and not at all true. So beware. But I want to say this because you can go very deep with this topic, and I want to just say at the outset, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a polyvagal theory researcher. I'm not a nervous system expert. I'm certainly none of those things. What I am is a leadership coach who does this work very practically in the day-to-day environment with my clients. I've also done it for myself. So what we are talking about today, we're not going to be going into the physiology of this necessarily, though the strategy I'm going to be sharing with you will actually impact your physiology. But what I'm talking about today is the everyday, calm under pressure, practical, pragmatic ways to maintain your composure and manage your reactions in the everyday world of work. Okay, we're not going to be dipping into a bunch of theory here. This is going to be very practical. What I have learned is there is a very simple and really practical entry point into this. Something that anyone can start doing, even in the middle of a busy week. You will be able to put this into practice, and it's going to meaningfully change how you show up under pressure. So that is my promise for you today. It's a deep dive on a very simple, practical practice. It is not a deep dive on all of the research around nervous system regulation, trauma-informed leadership, any of those topics. We're looking at a really simple and practical entry point, because that's what we can fit into a 30-minute episode for today. So let's get into it. So let me start by maybe dismantling the word calm a little bit, because I think just that very definition, or our ideas around that word calm, is what can get in the way of us stepping into this ability to maintain our composure, or to step into this, or why leaders sometimes struggle with it. When we picture a composed leader under pressure, sometimes we picture someone who just doesn't react, who is stone-faced, no emotion, maybe feels a little icy on the outside, unshakable. Do they have emotions in there? That's sometimes what we picture. And if you are someone who carries a lot of emotion, if that's your idea of what calm under pressure is, or what calm is, that's going to feel really unattainable, because you're going to have a lot of emotions. You're going to have a lot of passion going through you. And you're thinking, well, I'm not that person who has a stone face or a poker face, or is able to maintain that kind of composure. How can I step into this? How can I do this? So I want to name something. That stone face, poker face, that kind of composure, that's not always what I mean by composure. That can sometimes be suppression or dissociation, or simply putting on a mask, performing. It might be someone burying their reaction so successfully that they look composed on the outside, but on the inside, they are flapping their feet like a duck, like a really panicky duck. Their nervous system might really be on fire on the inside, and this can really catch up with you over time if you're constantly suppressing or dissociating from the actual emotion or what you're feeling. that can, believe it or not, actually lead to burnout because that's actually burning through your system. You can end up disconnected from your team and from other people. And you can end up very cynical if you're constantly bearing how you really feel and putting on this mask. So if this idea of staying calm, you kind of think, oh, I've just got to put on this mask and pretend that everything's okay all the time, that will have an enormous toll on you mentally and physically and emotionally. So I want you to consider composure in a different way, and real composure, and especially composure as a leader, as something a little bit different from that. Real composure, and what I would say, ideal leadership composure, has a warmth in it. It has humanity in it. And it very well might have some visible feeling in it. Being calm and cool and having some composure doesn't mean that you're dead inside. It doesn't mean that you don't get to have some sort of emotional reaction. I should change that. Some kind of emotional response. We're actually going to talk about the difference between response and reactivity. What this means, you can absolutely still be a leader that says, I'm frustrated by this too. Or I know that was a hard piece of news to hear. You can be affected by what's going on. You can be human. The key here, and this is what I really want you to take in, the key is not being taken over by that emotion. So if you're saying, hey, yeah, I'm frustrated by this too, not letting that frustration completely take over the way you are communicating with that person at that time. Or that was a hard piece of news. I'm just going to leak my emotions about that hard piece of news onto my entire team without processing it first. Okay. So the key thing is you're allowed to have emotion. You are allowed to have a response, but it is an unfiltered response or being taken over where you don't feel like you have, an element of, what's the word I'm looking for? Control keeps coming to my mind, but it's not necessarily control over that emotion. It's being conscious. There we go. That's our word. Conscious Productivity Podcast. We're looking for consciousness of response here. So I want you to be conscious around what you're saying next. So it's not necessarily controlling it, but being very conscious rather than, we've all been in those moments probably where that emotion can actually take over and suddenly we're on autopilot or we're reacting rather than having a really conscious response to what's in front of us. So composure is not the absence of a reaction at all. It's the presence of mindful communication and conscious thought. It's the presence of a pause between what is coming into us and how we're choosing to respond to it. Okay, that pause, which is really important. The pause is really where this choice lives. And I am obviously not the first person to say this. We've heard of this before, this pause between stimulus and response. But this is what I want to bring into your leadership practice. And this is what can really help you access composure, because that pause is where leadership actually happens. Without it, you are running on autopilot. Whatever your personality patterns are, whatever your typical response patterns are, you are just going to flip into that emotional reactivity if you are not cultivating a pause, a conscious pause in how you respond as a leader. So as a leader, what we're really looking to cultivate here is to go from reacting to responding and really making sure we're adjusting between that stimulus and that response that's happening. So that's the skill. That's what we're trying to build today. So let's talk about what actually throws you off, because if the goal is to build a pause, the first question will be, what a pause between what and what. You have to actually know what's throwing you off, and you have to recognize that you are being thrown off or emotionally thrown off in order to have a pause before you respond. So you have to have a deep level of self-awareness, or at least some level of self-awareness. You have to know your triggers, because you can't regulate what you can't see. If it's unconscious, right? This is our shift from unconscious productivity to conscious productivity. If you're not aware of what your patterns are, if you're not aware of what triggers you, or you're not aware of when you are triggered or when something has brought out an emotional response in you, if you don't notice what's happening to you in that moment, how on earth can you catch yourself in the moment and pause? So that's the first step, is really understanding what throws you off. Most of us are responding to the same handful of patterns our entire lives. We humans, we like to think we're really complex, but a lot of our reactivity comes from just a handful of things that are pretty common among all of us. So I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just saying that we can really start to identify what those triggers are. And I like to get a little playful with it because we all have these emotional triggers. It's not something that we need to bury or be embarrassed about. We can just say to ourselves, yeah, I'm human. I'm going to have some emotional reactions. I'm going to have things that elicit an emotional response in me. It's not that I'm never going to have that. And it's not that, nobody has those. It's what we do with that when it happens. And that's what we're trying to cultivate. So in spirit of, I love my top 5 list, in the spirit of the top 5 list, let's go through the top 5 triggers that can throw us off base and can really set us into a place of reacting rather than responding. So the first trigger that comes up quite a lot is the fear of looking incompetent. And this is especially true for leaders. When you're in a position of authority, when you're in a position of supposed expertise in leading a team, it can feel really threatening when we feel like we don't know something, or someone on our team maybe knows something better than we do. We may, and of course, as leaders, we know we are supposed to cultivate expertise on our team. It is a great thing when people on our teams know more than we do. As a leader, you can't possibly know everything about everything on your team. And if you do, you are probably too in the weeds anyway and need to kind of bring yourself up to a more strategic level. But this happens all the time. We get in the weeds because we're used to like, hey, if I know the most, I'm going to be the most successful. Or if I know the most, I'm not going to get caught in a mistake. I'm not going to get caught off guard. It's this fear of looking incompetent. Somebody in a meeting asks you a question, you don't have the answer. Someone challenges your idea, you don't have an immediate response. A piece of information gets brought forward that you don't know about. That can trigger this fear of incompetence. And in that moment, we can go into autopilot and have a very strong emotional reaction. Something in you can activate in that moment. Maybe you become defensive. Maybe you start over-explaining. Maybe you just shut the conversation down entirely and maybe get a little aggressive about it. Maybe you suddenly take on a position that you maybe wouldn't have taken on 5 minutes ago if you'd given yourself a chance to think about it. So underneath all of these reactions is that same fear of like not knowing enough, fear of that incompetency. So I need to overcompensate for that. So if this is your trigger, just know, welcome to the club. So many people have this trigger. So many people have this. And let's just name it. It doesn't feel good in that moment to feel like you don't know something or that you're caught off guard. The first step is noticing, yes, this is something that can throw me off. This is something that shakes me off my center. So that's what I want you to think about. Picture a situation where this happens. Is this something that can throw you off? Understanding yourself and knowing and building your self-awareness around this is the key and the first step in being able to manage your way through it. So just notice, oh, I'm having a competency reaction to this right now. You can think that in your own head. You don't need to say it out loud. Second trigger that comes up a lot is the fear of losing control. So someone introduces some kind of unpredictability into your world. A decision goes in a direction that you didn't want. Someone reorganizes your team without asking you or makes a decision that impacts your team without asking you. A meeting takes a turn that you didn't plan for. Someone brings in some chaos. Maybe someone comes in with a lot of emotionality or some drama that you weren't expecting or logistical chaos that you weren't expecting. Anything that is not within the realm of what you thought you could control or outside what you were trying to control. Again, something in you activates when this happens. So notice you trying to grab the reins back. Maybe you overcorrect. Maybe you become more directive than you should be. You interrupt people, you cut people off, or maybe you go quiet and cold and really withdraw from the conversation. Notice if this is your pattern. Notice if this is something that throws you off. Is it a control piece? Again, welcome to the club. Lots of people with this feeling of control, especially as a leader, because the higher up you go, the more responsibility you have. And it can feel like the consequences get a lot stronger the higher up you go. So, of course, we're going to feel a little threatened when we lose control of something. So just acknowledge that for yourself. It's not about punishing it. It's not about saying, I'm a bad leader because I have this response. We all have one or more of these triggers that can come up for us. It's noticing it. It's not letting it take control of you. Okay. So again, just notice this if it shows up for you, if this is something that can throw you off your center. Trigger number 3, frustration with people who don't work the same way you do. So this one can be a little spicier. I see it. I can see it often. And this is why I do a lot of team interpersonal dynamic work, because what we want on a team is we want diversity of personality. We want diversity of thought. We want diversity in so many different ways on our team so that we can get to the best possible solutions, multiple perspectives, innovation, fresh perspectives. We want that on the team. The problem is when we have diversity of personality and diversity of things, we don't always agree and we don't see things the same way. And so this can be a great source for innovation and getting to great outcomes, but it can also create interpersonal friction. So this is one that I really want you to pay attention to. Sometimes you'll say, oh, I really love working with that person. And you love working with them because they work exactly the same way you do. They think the same way you do. They behave the same way you do. And so that makes it very easy. Is that best for business? No. If we've got two people that think and feel the exact same way, you're not going to be getting the right diversity of thought. So starting to learn how to respect different personality styles, different approaches to work is really important, and it can really be a big trigger for people. So you will identify as being a certain kind of worker with a certain definition of work ethic and what that means for you. Maybe you like to answer your emails as soon as they come in, and it really drives you crazy when people take 24 hours to respond. Maybe you like to be early on deadlines, or maybe you like to work on things right at the last minute. Maybe you really like to prepare before a meeting. Maybe you don't like all the details shown to you ahead of something, so that we all have our own preferences around how we approach our work. Now, of course, there are situations where if someone is chronically unprepared, or if someone doesn't own up to their mistakes, there are extremes to this where, yes, as a leader, it goes beyond just being frustrating with a different work style. It can become a performance problem. What I'm talking about here is just different approaches to work and getting really frustrated by that. And every time you encounter this, work style with this other person, you get frustrated. It throws you off. Maybe you get a little judgy. It can show up as resentment. All kinds of things can show up here. So what is often at the root of this is just a different personality style. And so it will take time to respect this style. At this point, I want you just to start to notice if you have certain people, certain colleagues, certain team members that really can throw you off and can really trigger you into a reactive place. And then really ask yourself, is what they're doing truly a performance issue? Is it going against the culture, the corporate culture or the values? Or is this just a difference in preference and difference in style? Because those are two very different things. But you can get very triggered by this. Trigger number 4, feeling disrespected or dismissed. Another biggie. And if this is happening to you in your workplace, I do want to really empathize, because if someone is talking down to you or someone is talking over you, someone dismisses an idea, unfortunately, disrespect does happen in the workplace. Most workplaces will have their values on the wall, and one of them will be respect. And yet incidences of disrespect in the workplace happen often. And so, of course, I would say this is going to be a very common trigger. Almost every single human is going to feel quite reactive and emotional when they feel disrespected or dismissed. So it's what you do with that in the moment. Remember, I'm not saying in any case that your reaction or your feeling is incorrect. As a leader, it's what you do with that in the moment. So if you are disrespected or dismissed in the moment, are you able to notice it and say, this is now the third time this has happened, right? You're in your mind thinking about what's going on rather than reacting and going into autopilot, fighting back in the moment, or saying something sarcastic instead of saying something that is really authentic and true. This is where I really want you to cultivate that pause to say, okay, let me take in what's happened. And then I really want to think about, what am I going to do next? What am I going to say next? Staying silent, not necessarily the answer. It could be the answer in that moment until you plan your next steps. But I really want you to take a moment to think about, okay, I've just experienced this disrespect. What is my best next step? So noticing that it's happening, notice that emotional reaction that's happening in you. And depending on who's in the room, depending on the situation, what you might do next would differ. Okay, but notice if this is something that is coming up for you in the workplace. And again, if it is, I am empathizing with you on the other side over here, because it's a really tough situation to be in if you're feeling chronically dismissed or disrespected. Trigger number 5, being caught off guard. This does relate to one of the earlier ones around things being out of your control, but this can sometimes be in its own category as well. You were expecting one thing and it turns out to be completely different. Your boss brings you a surprise piece of negative feedback with no warning. How do you react to that? There's a big client suddenly leaves, a team member resigns, someone brings you a mistake that you didn't know they had made. So any of these things where you're caught off guard, I am going to put this in its own category because as a leader, this is likely to happen to you often. There is no crystal ball. We're not able to predict what's going to happen next. And so uncertainty really is part of the job. And also, how frustrating is it when you're completely caught off guard? I know for me, this is something I've had to work on over the years where I would just love to be like, if I do all the right planning and follow all the right steps, then I can get this beautiful guaranteed outcome. That is what I would have dreamed of earlier on in my career. And I've just learned through experience, as we all have, that we can put the best laid plans in place. We can do everything to try to mitigate things going sideways, to mitigate risk, to prevent mistakes from happening. And they're going to happen. We can invest so much in a member of our team and they might resign on us anyway. We can do all the right things and still a client might move on somewhere else. There's all these things that can happen that can catch us off guard despite us doing everything right. And that's where it can feel really tough. And this can really trigger an emotional reaction. So again, something in you activates, maybe you freeze, maybe you go into rapid problem solving mode and before anybody's fully processed the information, including yourself, and you're just trying to, save the moment or desperately trying to regain control in that moment. So I want you to think about this. Is this a really particularly big trigger for you? And if so, just notice it at this point. I'm going to talk next about how to utilize the pause, but the purpose of identifying these 5 triggers was for you to start to think about what does throw me off center? What is it that rattles me during the day? That is step number 1. Remember what we were saying before, you can't manage what you don't notice. If it's unconscious and you don't know what's happening, how the heck are you supposed to make it conscious and make a different choice? So the first step in all of this is deepening your self-awareness and understanding for yourself where you get rattled. So now we're going to move into what do you do once you've identified that trigger, once you've identified what rattles you, we're going to talk about this pause. So we'll talk about that. There's that gap between stimulus and response. There's a difference between reacting and responding. This pause is your biggest leadership asset. And I mean that. It is the difference between a leader who reacts on autopilot and will get thrown emotionally off center for their entire career, and that leader who chooses how they show up. Doesn't mean being that stone-faced, I never show any emotion. It just means I'm going to take a breath before I respond to this. I am going to sleep on this before I do something next. The pause can be one of the greatest things in your leadership toolkit. If you've been in my leadership programs, you'll know I'll often joke a sip of water can be your best friend sometimes. So if you are caught off guard by something, if you feel, we just talked about identifying when you get triggered. If you feel yourself getting activated emotionally and you think, there we go. I remember that podcast episode. I'm having an emotional reaction here. Even taking a sip of water in a meeting or during a call, that will buy you a few seconds just to regain your composure. You will be amazed what can happen just by taking if all you have are a few seconds, that can make a huge difference. Now, I'm not saying taking a sip of water can solve everything, but sometimes as leaders, we can be faced with situations where that's all we've got. You'll be overtaken by something. You're in a meeting where you absolutely need to respond in the moment. Take a breath, take a sip of water, buy yourself a moment to say, okay, how do I want to respond to this? And that literally can be what goes through your head. It might sound silly, but I promise you, by taking that little pause, that sip of water, that breath, and just saying in your own mind, how do I want to respond to this right now, is going to change what comes out of your mouth next. But in reality, the pause is going to look different depending on the situation. So like I said, we sometimes have 3 seconds. You're in a live meeting. Someone says something that lands really hard with everyone. Everyone's looking at you as the leader. You have to respond, and you have to respond now. In those 3 seconds, you can still create the pause. That's the sip of water pause. That's the taking a breath. Or you actually can say in that moment, you know what? Let me think about this for a moment. Or say to everybody, you know what? I do want a moment for that. Let's take a quick 5-minute bio break and come back in 5 minutes. Those are things that I really want you to think about. You don't need to have the perfect answer in the moment. And if you need to call a break in a meeting just to gather your thoughts and think about something or gather some more information, absolutely leverage that. Just that little few seconds or few minutes can make a huge difference. It can interrupt that autopilot reaction, and it can give you a chance to choose your response. It can give you a second to collect your thoughts. And so those 3 seconds or those 5 minutes can be better than nothing. And they will be better than not taking a pause at all every single time. Sometimes you will have the benefit of taking a real pause. So let me sit with this for a few minutes and come back to you. Let me finish this one thing I'm working on, and then I'll come and see you, or I'll call you back in 10 minutes, or I'll sit down and have a longer conversation with you in about an hour. I just need to finish this email. So even that can buy you time for something that feels like it needs more presence or more attention. It gives you that time to actually start to prepare for what that conversation is. If someone says to you, hey, can I share some feedback with you right now in this moment? Sometimes we think we have to say yes to that question in the moment. And you could actually say, I'm right in the middle of a really important document that I'm working on right now, or I'm just about to head into a really critical meeting. If possible, could we have this feedback conversation later today or tomorrow or later in the week? Now, I caveat this by saying this is not a deflection technique. I don't want you delaying a negative conversation, but give yourself that pause if you can. If now it really isn't a good time for you to take in that feedback, request to receive it later. Buy yourself that pause so that you can show up really emotionally present and prepared for that conversation. Could be an overnight pause, or it could be you're in the middle of a really tough conversation with someone. You feel like you're spinning your wheels with them, and you just name it. This can be, again, a really great leadership practice to say, you know what, it feels like we're going in circles here. Let's both go back. Let's gather some new information. Let's collect our thoughts, or let's look into this, or let's take it back to our teams and talk about this, and then we'll reconvene. So I won't know the specific situation that you're facing, but sometimes if you feel yourself getting really activated in a meeting because you're not on the same page anymore, or it's going in circles, no one's willing to make a decision. If you can buy yourself time, or you can just name it and say, I think we both need to do a little more research here, or I think we need to gather some more information, or I think we need to cool off. It's getting pretty heated in here. We don't need to make this decision today. Let's both let off some steam and come back to this tomorrow, or come back to this in a couple of days. So I want you to think that's one way that you can really buy yourself time. You can also say to someone, this is really important. I want to give this the thought it deserves. So I can't give you an answer right now in the moment. Let me think about this. Can you give me a day or two? Can I come back to you in a couple of days? Or what's your deadline on this? Or when do you need my answer by? These are all ways of building in a pause. And it really is a lost art. I do find in our corporate environments, we're moving so quickly. Everything is fast, urgent, urgent, urgent. We've lost this ability to actually sit back and give ourselves time to think. And AI is only exacerbating this. It's so easy to just put in prompt after prompt after prompt and get more and more and more information. It feels like it's pushing that urgency even faster. And yet, AI's response is only going to be as good as the input we put into it, right? Garbage in, garbage out. That's always going to flow. So what I want you to think, it's not about, I don't want you to think, I know that the business pace is moving quickly right now. I'm not suggesting that we're going to move at a slow pace or at a snail's pace, but for the sake of making really great decisions, for the sake of culture and relationships, sometimes the best thing you can do is buy yourself 5 minutes, an hour, overnight to think about it, to name it when the team is going in the wrong direction and needs to be pulled back in, to say, hey, I'm going to name it and call out what's hard right now. We're not functioning well right now. We need to do this differently. So let's all take a pause and let's do something differently. Let's have you take on this piece of responsibility and you take on this piece of responsibility. There's a number of different ways that you can reset the team by giving them a pause without losing momentum on a project or on an initiative. So this isn't necessarily about moving really, really slowly. It's about using a pause strategically. And for you, calm under pressure, placing these pauses and thinking about how you want to respond rather than react is going to make everything function better for you and for your team. So as we close out this episode today, I want to leave you with 3 questions, hopefully practical ones you can actually work with this week that you can put into practice. You can sit with them, you can write them down. You can bring them up in conversations that you're going to be having in the upcoming week. Number 1, I want you to think about what is your most common trigger, the one that most often throws you off, takes you from that, being really in that place of conscious response to reactivity. So of the 5 that we talked about, was there one there that you thought, yeah, that's really the one that really throws me off? Or was it something that I didn't list? If I missed something that is a major trigger for you or something that really throws you off, let me know. Send me a note and let me know, because I love to hear what's going on for all of you. So if there's something I didn't talk about that's really important, let me know. But narrow it down to 1. If all 5 of them are triggers for you, figure out for yourself which is the one that throws you off the most, because I don't want this to feel overwhelming and feel like you have to take on 5 different triggers all at once. Pick the one that is most likely to set you off and take you off onto emotional autopilot. Question number 2, what does the pause I need look like for me? So once you've thought about the trigger, picture yourself in that situation and say to yourself, what kind of pause, if this were to happen again, what kind of pause do I need? Would it be, that sip of water pause? Would it be asking for more time? And how can I really remember that for when this comes up again or when this happens? What kind of pause do I want to leverage in that moment? Okay, so I want you to think about that. And I will say, all the research does suggest that even taking a walk in the morning or doing some kind of reflective practice like meditation or journaling first thing in the morning, if that's what you do first, it's actually going to set you up to be way more responsive rather than reactive throughout your day. You're going to be a little less rattleable. I know rattleable isn't a word, but you're going to be less, it's going to be harder to rattle you if you have a really strong morning practice that involves some reflection, walking, or journaling, meditating, any of those kind of practices, instead of jumping out of bed, rushing to your phone, checking emails, and really getting into rush. This doesn't need to be, a 1 hour, let me sit in a beautifully designed meditation space, or let me, journal for an hour. This can be a 5-minute practice in the morning. There are so many guided meditations that you can access. Even if all you do is move from bed and stare out the window for 5 minutes, even that can be a reflective practice that just calms you and puts you in a real state of presence before you start your day. Research shows that can change the entire trajectory of your day. So that can be a type of pause, like a proactive pause that you take at the start of your day before you even get into the chaos. But then think about, what are the kinds of things that can throw me off, and how do I want to use the pause for that? Question number 3, I want you to look at your calendar, look at the next 7 days, look at the days that are coming up. And I want you to think about, maybe there's a specific kind of meeting or a specific team that you're meeting with, or specific individuals or colleagues that in the past have kind of rattled you, or you tend to get more reactive than you would like. I want you to actually get proactive about that. Look at the calendar and say, of the meetings that are coming up, of the things that I'm doing this week, where am I likely to get thrown off center? Where am I likely to get reactive rather than responsive? And start to plan ahead and think, is that a day where I can, give myself a 5-minute breather before I step into that meeting? Can I plan a quick walk before I step into that? If this person says this, how am I going to respond in the moment? So start to think about that in advance, to start to think about how you can use the information that you've gleaned from the podcast today. How can you put that into practice this week with what's coming up for you? I hope you've got some good takeaways from this today, that calm and composure under pressure doesn't mean being stone-faced. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have emotions. It doesn't mean that you're putting on a mask every day. Not at all. What it means is really stepping into deeper self-awareness, understanding yourself, getting in touch with those reactive points that we all have as humans, things that are going to rattle us. We all have them. And starting to think about, how can I build this pause into my life every day. And you can do this in your personal life as well as your professional life. But where can I leverage this pause, this little gap between stimulus, response? How can I go from unconscious autopilot to a more conscious response where I'm actually choosing a way to be my best self, or at the very least, my better self in these moments that can throw me off base. So thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. You can always reach me, Stephanie at agencytochange.com. I love hearing from you. You can also find me over on Instagram, over on LinkedIn. If you are interested in doing this kind of work more deeply, deeper self-awareness, understanding yourself, growing your leadership skills, optimizing is what I like to say, your leadership skills. The folks I work with tend to already be really strong leaders, and it's about optimizing and maximizing that effectiveness and really stepping in to your best version of leadership. This is where one-on-one executive coaching can really be fantastic, because you get a confidential sounding board, and we can really tailor it to your specific goals. So if you are interested in that, I do have spaces. I will be taking on new clients in the fall. So do reach out if you're interested in a one-on-one executive coaching relationship. I always do discovery calls so that we can see, are we a match? You can ask me any questions you have about the process, as well as anything you're looking for your team. If you're looking to do leadership development with your teams, we can talk about that as well. In the meantime, take care. Here's to more conscious workplaces. Here's to approaching our work more consciously. I really believe that as we step into more conscious work, our work can actually contribute positively to our mental, emotional, spiritual, physical health. I really do believe that. But it takes us all showing up more consciously. So let's go out there and show up in our workplaces in a really conscious way and make our workplaces better places to be and work. And I will see you in the next episode.